and watch that transformation and those spirits just coming in front of their faces.
Well, in 1983, I founded the Thought Workshop, which is the UK's first centre for psychic and spiritual studies. And I was fortunate to meet a lot of the veteran mediums, a lot of the older mediums. I'm talking, when I say old, in 1983, one particular medium, she was about 80, 89, 90, and her name was Queenie Nixon. And she was a transfiguration medium with a difference. She didn't use a red light. She just sat there and she'd go into trance and her voice would change. She was from upcountry, a place called Derby, which is a community in the UK. So she had a broad accent. And when I first saw this woman, she was in trance when I first met her. I had a private consultation. And she was very refined, very straight, her posture, her pose. And she was very, very, sounded well-to-do and very intelligent, very articulate. And she came out with my father had not long died. And she came up with information, mentioned all his family, and my dad was called Albert. And she called him by his name and said he was here. And she asked me, I was the last one to sit with her. She asked me would I stay with her while she brought her lady back. And I did. And I heard this whooshing sound, like a swish that came from behind me to her. And then she suddenly, her shoulders dropped and her face wrinkled. And I couldn't believe, I thought I was looking at somebody completely different. And she opened her eyes and yawned. And her accent was just a different voice, different tone. And her whole demeanor was completely that of another person. And she worked at my place a lot after that. And unfortunately, she fell into poor health, as you would in your 90s, and wasn't able to travel. And she was, and you know about Ursula Roberts, who's famous for Ramadan. She was from down south. She worked there as well, and she worked in trance. But she gave long discourses, philosophical discourses from Ramadan, a guide who was well known. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
Yes, it is. It really is. So yeah, there's a lot of realms in mediumship. So there's a lot of avenues one can go down if they are truly a medium. But best thing you can do is try to just develop it. And I think, for me anyway, one of the things that was extremely helpful for me in my development, because, for 20 years, I really thought I was doing mediumship on paranormal investigations. And when my daughter passed and I couldn't reach her, it was when I really, really questioned what I had been doing for so long and and I realized that I had only been scraping the surface of what was on that other side. And I really wasn't doing as full of mediumship as I could have been. And that's when I really started trying to develop it, was at that point. And,
people find, I think I said this was it the forward I did or in your book? A lot of people, when they lose a daughter or a son, they turn away from spiritual things. Case, you were drawn more to it. And because of the nature, the way you cared and loved your daughter, she was probably, and I do feel this, she was a part of a group, you being another part of it. And she would have, in the spirit world, she would have been very close to you to guide you and encourage you, to give you the confidence that you'd obviously lost over the years for some reason. And also to replace or to be a part of the love that you created. And when I talk to you, when we've had conversations, I often feel a presence, and I know that you do too. And I know she helps you a lot.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a little break now, take a little commercial break, and we will be right back. Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith. And we're back. All right. Well, thanks, Billy. That was very, very interesting. So we are going to change the subject here a little bit. I've got somebody that wrote in, a lady by the name of Angela from Philadelphia, and she had some questions. She's wondering, how does she know if she's seeing a loved one in her dreams? How does she know that that's really a communication from the loved one, or is it just a dream? What is your take on that, Billy?
Well, I always advise people to write their dreams down, and very often, if there's a reason for it, your loved ones will communicate in your dreams, and it's the content of what occurs. Sometimes the dreams are not very nice; they can be very emotional and leave you feeling very sad and depressed. Now, you shouldn't dismiss that kind of dream, because very often that's a valid dream. It's a dream when your loved one has come close to you. So it's really only about the communication, the content that's brought forward in the dream, and how much of it you remember, the detail. A lot of the time, the dreams are symbolic, and they're influenced sometimes by the food that you've had before you go to bed. But if you want to really want to find out you should have a question in your mind before you go to sleep. And if you lie flat on your back before you go to sleep and just take a few deep breaths with your eyes closed and just ask him or her a question. It might not come that first night, but if you do it on a regular basis, you'll find all the answers will be given, because that's often the only way they can communicate with you is through your dreams. And don't forget, the spirit world is not a place. It's a transcendental state or condition. And they don't have a physical body, but they can replicate the way they look. And they'll often bring the feeling that you know only too well, how they felt, their odor, their smells, everything about them can come forward in a dream. But you always keep a pad, some paper by your bed. And if you wake up in the middle of the night, write down the content of the dream, and you'll find it will make sense to you over a few days.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a lot of dreams in the very beginning after Stephanie passed. Once I was able to really connect with her, I had a lot of dreams. And one of the things that I noticed with the dreams is that if it was just a dream, because I had a lot of nightmares too. I had a lot of dreams where I could never reach her. She would be way over there and I'd see her and I could never reach her. And I knew that was my working out the acceptance of her death. And I could distinguish that as being just a dream. And that was something that, trying to work through the grief. But there were other dreams where it was so vivid. It was, the only way I could describe it as more real than real.
Yeah.
Colors were more vibrant. Smells were just so much more fragrant. Everything, sounds, everything. It's every part of your senses was just so much more alive than it could have possibly been in this physical plane. And it was very distinguishable to me as a place. I mean, literally, it was, I always saw her in a field, and I could even feel the grass, the blades of grass, the tall grass rubbing against me and smelling the wildflowers. And it was just so much more vibrant and then I would wake up and I would feel her presence. It was as if she was just there. And,
yeah.
And to me, that's how I experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The colors are very vivid. It's very surreal. It's like a Salvador Dali world sometimes.
Right.
Nothing seems to be real. That there are no alternating periods of night and day. And this is a point a lot of people miss. So the spirit people, your daughter included, would not be aware that it's nighttime. And sometimes they'll communicate probably in the middle of the night or in the early hours of the morning. And you have to have some routine, You have to make them aware of the concept of time in relation to this world, because they don't have any conception of it. And because they live in a different place altogether, uh, there are different dimensions, obviously. And we have the power to traverse from one dimension to another, either in our sleep or when we're fully awake. Because you are more than a physical body. You are a sevenfold being. And each body of yours, each of these seven bodies, is subdivided into seven, and so on and so forth through infinity. So you're quite an extensive human being. You're a cosmic, multidimensional being, as we've said before. And you have all these abilities that often become more active when you're asleep. Your friends, particularly when you've lost somebody that you miss greatly, like your daughter, Stephanie, and that often sadness can stop them moving away from you. And sometimes you have to allow them a little bit of freedom, allow them to get on with their own life. Because I know not just Stephanie, but other people who've lost somebody, these our loved ones will always be drawn to us when we need them most. And I found that from my own experience. But sleep is important, as long as we are aware that they don't understand the concept of time.
I had a friend that passed away right before Stephanie, a few months before Stephanie, and without fail, he would show up at 4 a.m. always. And when he first passed, I would physically feel him poking me in my ribs, and I could see a silhouette of someone standing there, and it would be like, why do you pick 4 a.m.? What is it with you at the 4 a.m.? And
Mhm.
some people call that angel time or spirit time, and it's like, no, for some reason. But it also was a time in which the level of sleep that I was in, I was also more receptive, because
Yeah,
had he maybe appeared when I had all these other things going on, the computer, on the television, on the dogs barking, somebody at the door, I may have not noticed it. So that could be another explanation, is that
yeah.
you are more receptive at that time. And I would imagine at 4 a.m. I was probably in a rather deep state of sleep. And, of course, when you suddenly have someone poking you in your ribs, you're like, no, 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 not now, not
Mhm.
now. But yeah, it does seem that they do pick strange hours in the early morning to want to visit. It's always a welcome thing
But
when you do get that visit.
don't forget, our consciousness changes. It fluctuates during the course of a night's sleep. And the hypnagogic state is when you're actually falling into sleep. That state of mind between being awake and being asleep, sometimes you can be overtired. And it's during that time that we might hear somebody call our name, or we might see these minute faces passing through our consciousness, or you might hear your daughter calling you mummy, or whatever she called you. And that's a very important part of consciousness, is when you're not quite asleep. You think you are, but you're not. And then you go into the deep realms of sleep when you lose control. There are two kinds of silence: a passive silence and an active silence. The passive silence is the silence of sleep, and it's the silence of death. We have no control over it. And the active silence is the silence of just being silent and meditation, when you can control it. But it's the passive silence that's important to our loved ones, because when you're in a deep zone, deep sleep, that's when they have no problem at all coming close to you. But the thing that you have to always be aware of, people who are developing mediumistic skills need to abide by all the rules. And you said earlier on, you need some kind of spiritual background, spiritual overcoat, because there are vagabonds in the spirit world. And sometimes when you're developing your mediumistic skills and you're in this particular zone in deep sleep, you're out of control. And sometimes these vagabonds can come close. They can infiltrate your aura and affect you. They can't harm you, but they can disturb your sleep and make you have a nightmare or something. And it's then that your loved ones, your daughter, your sons, your father, they come close to protect you. And then you have your so-called spirit guides. You have a doorkeeper, which is somebody who's been with you before you were born and will be with you right through this life. And the door is effectively the aura, they protect you